Good morning, everybody. I'm David, and I'm here with another video. Today I'm gonna be talking about David Koresh and how the CIA manipulated him to do everything, and then they played cleanup, which they did in the Charles Manson thing too. If you watch the new show called Chaos on Netflix, it shows how MK Ultra and stuff was using Charles Manson kind of as a patsy. They wondered why that he got released from prison, and that was because he was a mind control project. But first, I want to read something positive before I start, and it says, "No amount of regret can change the past. No amount of anxiety changes the future, but any amount of gratitude changes the present." So, when you find yourself having a bad day, sit down and write a gratitude list of things you're grateful for, and just think about things you've got to be grateful for. And everybody can find something to be grateful for. Okay, so here we go. We're going to get into the information now. Okay, I'll go right here. And then I'll go right here. Okay, so here we're going to start with this information. Okay, here we go. Perhaps not since the Reichstag fire in Nazi Germany have flames leaped so visibly into the pages of history. The flames in both Waco and Reichstag fires are fueled by mind control. At least that's the impression you get when you read the attorney Paul D. Wilcher's letter to Attorney General Janet Reno. Dated May 21st, 1993, the letter begins with no salutation, the phone numbers of Miss Reno, Justice Department, etc. Here it goes. Vital new information concerning the conflagration at David Koresh's Branch Davidian compound, Ranch Apocalypse outside Waco, Texas, on Monday, April 19th, 1993. This is a lawyer who wrote this to Janet Reno, which is now being kept from you covered up. That what was happened was not a mass suicide, but rather mass murder. This meaning significant new information. In future indictment, you're headed totally in the wrong direction because Bush administration holdovers in the Justice Department, along with others tied to the CIA, are preventing you from ever learning the truth about what happened in Waco. The extreme sensitivity of this information, my specific proposal as to how you should handle it. The lives of key participants, other witnesses, and even myself are in grave danger as a result of my passing this information to you. If you let this information fall into the hands of the wrong person, some or those who know the truth about Waco are now prepared to come forward and testify. You got to, and I don't think there's any danger in me bringing this out. This happened in 93 and is declassified. Okay, and the extreme importance of information to the overall quality of justice under the Clinton administration, if handled the manner I spelled out. All right, let's get to the meat of the situation. The purpose of this letter is Dear Attorney General Reno, in caps. The person in the letters to deliver you extremely sensitive information about the deaths of 86 men, women, children who perished at the Branch Davidian compound on Monday, April 19th, 1993, the truth of how it all happened. But even more important, my here is to demonstrate how the Waco tragedy fits into a much bigger, uglier picture to present my case detailed plan on how you should attack the overall problem and its root causes. The plan I'm offering you here is, see, I'm going, all right, so full of hope, not knowing that Janet Reno, Wilcher expresses optimism Ms. Reno would use her good office to attack the system of wide corruption. Okay, and then he launched into a long section entitled, What is the Right Thing to Do? The prose is filled with citations of law. All right, here's the subject of mind controls introduced on page 4 when Wilcher writes, David Koresh had an extensive CIA background. He was known in CIA circles as a sleeper, someone who had been subjected to extensive CIA mind control training and programming. Wilcher said it was not a coincidence that all these events were occurring in or near Waco, Texas, since Waco is a major center for CIA mind control experimentation and programming. With much of this activity occurring at CIA's Leadership Management Institute in Waco, Wilcher pointed out that CIA-sponsored cults are located across the country, including Salt Lake City, Utah, Provo, Utah, Logan, Utah, Boise, Idaho, and San Francisco, California. And all these cults can likewise explode on the front pages of the press anytime the CIA deems appropriate in order to accomplish its predetermined hidden right-wing political agenda. Wilcher indicated to Reno that he knew who had committed the murders, who had ordered them, and who had been a part of the chain of command. He then lapsed into more resuscitation of disciplinary rules from the American Bar Association. In fact, he was outlining for Reno reasons why she must begin to weed her own garden in the Justice Department. Thoroughly covering the details of lies told by government employees at Waco, Wilcher wrapped up the motivational part of his argument and launched into a background briefing on events leading to February 28th. To begin with, Vernon William Howe, also known as David Koresh, had connections to the CIA. Indeed, he and 6 of his men in his English circle were known among CIA operatives as sleepers, persons who the agencies had performed mind control experiments on and who had been pre-programmed to carry out specific CIA dirty business at some point in the future. One specific cue or signal was given to them by their contact person or handlers within the agencies. Third, David Koresh was very much like the Reverend Jim Jones in that he too was a gangster who used a Bible instead of a gun. And I really think, for those of us who hear V2K constantly, David Koresh had this one incident before he became who he was, where he seen Jesus and Jesus talked to him and told him to go on this trip and lay out this and gave him this view. They gave him. I hope he talks about it in here, and I think he does. I've read it a long time ago, I know it's a good. What I'm reading's fixing to be good, but if I'm not mistaken, he's homeless in his truck, and he has this encounter and hears God's voice, and I just wonder if they were using V2K to mind control him all along to see how far he would take it. Okay, third, David. Okay, in note, Wilcher remarked Jonestown was not a mass suicide more than Waco was. Instead, Jonestown, like Waco, was a mass murder in order to guarantee there'd be no survivors to tell about the mind control experiments. Fourth, Koresh was also very much like Charlie Manson in that he, Jones, and Manson all demanded and received total domination over and total submission from all the men, women, and children in his groups. And like the Reverend Jim Jones and Charlie Manson, Koresh likewise had received much of his controlled training at the hands of the CIA and was a product of their system. In other words, Koresh may have been what most people considered a thoroughly disgusting, mentally disturbed megalomaniac, but he was the CIA's megalomaniac, or at least someone they were all happy to use for their devious purposes, if and when the opportunity presented itself. Indeed, Koresh and these 6 other men in his inner circle had apparently been pre-programmed to become Manchurian candidate type robot assassins. Here, Wilcher inserted another note. This is one of the most crucially important pieces of information concerning the entire scenario. Koresh and his 6 fellow sleepers were apparently pre-programmed by CIA to become wind-up, use once, then throw away type assassins. Much like Saran B. Saran, the man the CIA used as a patsy in assassination of Senator Robert Kennedy on June 5, 1968, or David Hinckley, the man the CIA used in the patsy of attempted assassination of Reagan on March 31st, 1981. Apparently been able to produce Manchurian-type candidate robot assassins ever since the 40s, using methods reminiscent of brainwashing. We have we have all heard about in Soviet and American prisoner of war camps, as well as far more sophisticated and sinister techniques which have been developed and perfected over the intervening years. One of the most important features of this kind of mind control program of brainwashing is the fact that critical segments of the subject's memory, including most or all of the programming experiences itself, are erased or at least suppressed and deeply buried, with new false memories implanted into the subject's unconscious mind in their place. Indeed, all this mind, behavior, memory alterations done at the subconscious or unconscious level. Indeed, once the program has been completed, memory blocks are installed to the subject's subconscious mind to make it next to impossible for him to ever recover these critical mind and behavior altering experiences from his own internal memory bank. Therefore, since he's unable to remember what was done to him, or when, where, how, or under what circumstances it happened, he's also virtually helpless to confront and overcome what his CIA programmers have done. He is thus at their mercy. From then on, of course, they have no mercy. Then, at some time in the future, upon being given a specific secret signal known in advance only to his handlers and subconscious mind, to which any untrained person, such as husband, wife, co-worker, would be overlooked as being totally innocuous, he will automatically revert back to carrying out whatever behavior he's been pre-programmed to perform on cue. Nearly always some violent or criminal act against a person or group. So they could have had him programmed to where, they would have program him, and then years later, if you come and clap a certain way 3 times, it puts him in that Manchurian candidate mode. No, it sounds crazy, but hey, we're living in a crazy world. It's also important to note that such mind control programming generally includes one or more pre-programmed self-destruct responses, so the subject can be ordered by his handlers to commit suicide as a kind of mindless trance-like robotic response, which he would not even be conscious of where he's being ordered to do, or he was actually carrying out until it was too late to save him, if and when his handlers even deem it necessary for him not to be available for questioning by persons who might be able to uncover the truth about his secret programming and what tasks had been pre-programmed to perform in his robotic state. These self-destruct responses would typically be triggered by the subject's handlers once he had successfully performed his pre-assigned mission, or once that mission had been called off or altered, or any other scenario which he would no longer be of any value to the agency. As a way of protecting his handlers, the agency itself from any exposure, liability, or accountability under what's called plausible deniability. David's Koresh's psychological profile, however, showed him not to be a person ever likely to commit suicide. Wilcher went over to cover the programming of Candy Jones and death of George de Morschaudt, much as it's been covered in this book before. He also devotes a number of pages to the CIA's use of DC police, U.S. Park Service officers to cover what Wilcher was saying. Which Wilcher says are CIA covert operations in which 6 black men were murdered in Pershing Park, 2 blocks from the White House. These pages are all worth reading, but due to space considerations, I have deleted them. We pick up the letter after that again. Mind control and memory blocks to ease the consciousnesses of CIA professional killers. Thus far, we've been discussing mind control and memory blocks in the context of CIA candidate robot assassins, Sirhan, David Hinckley, Mark Chapman, who assassinated the Beatles' lead singer John Lennon, and 6 black men murdered in Pershing Park, persons who were programmed by the agency to be used only once and discarded, persons who are destined to either be killed or in prison for the rest of their lives once they've performed their preordained secret mission. In other words, these low-level individuals are highly expendable, particularly when getting rid of them would preserve the plausible deniability that the agency had anything to do with their training, conduct, or activities. In the context of these low-level individuals, the mind control program we've been discussing is used not only to condition the desired response to a preordained secret signal, but also prevent the subject from remembering anything to do with their training. In the context of these low-level individuals, the mind control program we've been discussing is used not only to condition the desired robotic response to a preordained signal, but also to prevent the subject from remembering anything about the program experience. So he's virtuously helpless without many, so to counteract or overcome it without many years of deep hypnosis and therapy, as in the case of Candy Jones. There is, however, a totally different category of covert operatives by the CIA, the real professional killers who are used for multiple high-level top-secret missions. These top operatives, generally men of extraordinary intelligence, education, talent, training, experience, and in their hands, most of the real dirty work of the agency, including top-level assassinations, is entrusted. For example, they would use a low-level robot like Sirhan or David Hinckley to be a patsy for a top-level assassination, but rarely entrust the task of actually pulling the trigger in such high-profile case to such a low-level cutout. Instead, the real work in top-level assassinations carried out by the agency's true professional killers, persons who are not used just once and discarded, but instead used over and over again. Wet ops, such dirty work is generally referred to among operatives within the agency as wet operations, where one or more persons to be killed. Debriefings after wet operations. The normal procedures that after each wet operation, all persons participating connected with operation are debriefed by a team sent from agency headquarters, including psychiatrists skilled in various mind control and memory techniques we've been discussing. In this debriefing, each member of the wet team is required to recite to the debriefing team exactly what happened during operation in a precise step-by-step detailed manner. Each member's recitation is generally repeated several times, once normally under hypnosis, once with polygram, once under scopolamine. Only when debriefers are fully satisfied they have gotten all the details and no glaring inconsistencies between different recitations is debriefing brought to a close. And you can see that if you watch the show Lioness. Part of the reason for this debriefing process to provide detailed records and feedback to the agency. Precisely what was done, what was the operation with success, did it go off as planned, et cetera, et cetera. You should subpoena these records immediately. Attorney General, and then, it says, what mistakes, if any, were made? It said, Wilcher inserts another note stating his point cannot be overstated. Remember, this is still the letter to Janet Reno. This means that deep within the bowels of the CIA, if you only know where to look, you can find detailed debriefing records on all wet operations carried out. It's hard to believe that someone who could write a letter which contains the information this one does would be so naive as not to understand how successful the cryptocracy has been under the National Security Act. Wilcher appeared ignorant of the extent of the cryptocracy's indoctrination. It's gotten virtually everywhere, everyone in Congress and judicial and executive support, so it cannot hide the tacit agreement. Summing up his comments on the wet debriefing process, Wilcher wrote, then at all conclusions of debriefing, once debriefers are confident they've gotten all the factual details, each operative is put under deep hypnosis, and the psychiatrist and the team implants memory blocks into his subconscious memory. A, to make it far more difficult for him to remember what he and his other wet team members did during the operation. B, to alleviate guilt, which would otherwise be associated with these memories. And of course, these memories of what he had and his fellows have done on these various wet operations are never completely erased, but at least these mental blocks make it easier for the operative to live with himself and conscious and help keep these vivid, gory images from flooding into his consciousness. These memory blocks are also a way of operative to justify his acting as targets, accuser, prosecutor, judge, jury, executioner. No notice, no hearing, no right to confront, cross-examine his accusers, no right to be put on defense, no right to testify. No, and you know what? The above paragraph describes the exact situation that today targeted individuals face. No due process, no constitutional protections, no right to be hearing, none of that. These memory blocks thus help the operative suppress all these troubling thoughts which might otherwise disturb his waking hours or restful sleep. Thought which might otherwise force him to re-examine his calling as one of the top professional killers and consider where he ought to pursue some other line of work. In discussing the pros and cons of wet operation, Wilcher revealed the extent to which he himself bought into the myth of national security. He said there may be some argument in favor of wet operations to take out foreign agents, overlooking the glaring historic reality that whenever a good civilization employed ruthless and immoral tactics of an evil enemy civilization to fight it, those tactics eventually came to be applied at home against the people, and the good nation became as evil as the one it was fighting. Wilcher did argue that he could see no excuse for using wet operations to take out innocent American men, women, and children, such as the 85 who were killed at Branch Davidian compound. The point to be made here is Koresh and his sleepers were low-level programmed assassins. Okay, the term sleeper in this context connotes the mind control program which had been done on Koresh and his inner circle had probably been done a number of years earlier. That the secret instructions implanted deep in their subconscious memories had lain dormant, that the CIA now had to arouse Koresh and the other six from their sleep to reactivate the secret conditioned responses implanted into the subconscious memories in order to get them to perform preordained secret missions on cue whenever they deemed it appropriate, and that the CIA could activate the self-destruct signal discussed on page 2020 to cause the robotic suicides of Koresh and his inner circle. Once they had been performed their secret mission, or any time they decided they were no longer of use to the agency. Wilcher went on to discuss Koresh's enormous stockpile of weapons, saying he believes arms were accumulated with the apparent knowledge and consent of the CIA over several years. He believed Koresh had acquired the arsenal for a specific purpose, which was not self-defense, but for the purpose of carrying out whatever secret assignments they were to be given by their handlers. He said Koresh was so skilled in controlling his followers, and the reason was that he and five other sleepers in his inner circle had been through such intensive total mind control programming themselves. It's not clear whether he presumes that they had been totally or partially deprogrammed along the way so they could remember their programming codes, cues, and triggers. Without them and without full recall and extensive deprogramming, the fact that they had been through such a process would be no use to their conscious minds. Wilcher says the reason behind the original raid by the alcohol, tobacco, and fire on February 28 was not to surprise Koresh or take him peacefully. The purpose was to be as heavy-handed, as unsubtle as possible, so Koresh and his fellow sleepers could not possibly miss the message, either shape up and get back into line or take you out. In the letter to Reno, Wilcher says that the message the cryptocracy wanted to give was not for the 6 sleepers within the compound, but to others who might be getting out of line elsewhere. Be prepared to carry out the orders we give you exactly as you've been pre-programmed to do, or you and all your loved ones will have hell to pay for your disobedience. Wilcher makes note of what others were independently note that the ensuing siege of the Branch Davidian compound, there were ATF agencies who were targeted to be killed. Linda Thompson's videos of the Waco siege shows 4 ATF agents being killed by a fifth agent after they crawled into a window from the roof. Wilcher told Reno Waco is an important tool of a PSYOPs campaign waged against the American people. He said the bottom line here is that the propaganda we're being fed by these agents were to pave the way for general acceptance of the imposition of martial law when situations like this get out of hand, which is the way they want us to view its 51-day siege of the Branch Davidian compound in Waco. Maintaining that the main purpose of the Waco attack was to control the subconscious minds and wills of Koresh and his followers, Wilcher told Reno that a variety of technologies were used over the 51-day siege. They made no secret that they were shining high-powered spotlights onto the compound at night, bombarding it with various kinds of sounds like acid rock music, Tibetan chants, Christmas songs, and so forth. It was obviously meant to annoy and deprive the people inside the compound of sleep. The news accounts quoted the FBI spokesman as saying if the sounds worked, the inhabitants of the Apocalypse Ranch would become more pliable to the FBI's demands and surrender peacefully, and there would be no loss of life. Wilcher told Reno the truth was far different. These incessant, loud, noxious noises were merely the cover for what was really bombarding the compound. 20 gigahertz microwave transmissions designed to be as stressful and destructive to the human physiology, inner ear, psyche, and mentally stable as possible. In short, the CIA has perfected the use of such high-intensity microwave transmissions on human subjects to such an extent they're absolutely certain over time such transmissions are beyond the ability of most human beings to endure, and that sooner or later they will drive any normal person crazy, literally, or provoke him or her to suicide or murder. One example of the use of high-intensity microwave transmission on a human subject occurred during the invasion of Panama, when Manuel Noriega fled to the Vatican embassy for sanctuary. What the press reported was that the military bombarded the Vatican embassy with very loud acid rock music. What they didn't tell us was that the music was, again, only the mask to cover what was really being beamed at General Noriega. These same density microwave transmissions are known to be beyond the limits of most human beings to endure, at least over any experienced time. And remember, Wilcher wrote that at the Branch Davidian compound, these high-intensity microwave transmissions continued almost without interruption, day and night, throughout the entire length of the 51-day siege. There are more than 20 children in the compound at this time. No wonder you were concerned about the gross mistreatment of these children, Attorney General Reno Wilcher wrote. But what the Reagan and Bush holdovers in the Justice Department failed to tell you was that our FBI and CIA were responsible for mistreating these children through these highly intensive microwave transmission were bombarding the compound 51 days. In fact, it doesn't matter whether Democrat or Republican is the White House, whoever's there occupies it with the consent of kleptocracy. Hopefully we've came to the end of that, but we've yet to see. Also included in these bombarding transmission were neuro-linguistic programming, other subliminal messages designed to reach subconscious minds of Koresh and his sleepers in order to reassert the CIA's control over them to make them more violent and obedient to CIA's command and domination. The readers advised to obtain Jeannie Laborde's landmark book on neurolinguistic programming entitled Influencing with Integrity. Wilcher's letter maintains the original plan behind the siege of the compound. The Delta Force was to have Delta Force make a night raid on the compound. Delta Force is no secret. It's an elite commando-style military unit confined to specifically trained members. We already know who they are. Those 7 men were to be killed, no question asked, period. To bring everyone out alive except David and his 6 fellow CIA sleepers. Okay. But to continue Wilcher's letter, in which a source informed him on the details of events, if true, only insiders could have known. On the 18th, the Parkland Hospital in Dallas was alerted to prepared to receive a large number of serious burn victims from Waco the following day. On the morning of 19th, Delta Force commandos were on alert, ready to carry out the first plan. It had been approved. Wilcher said this was not just an ordinary Delta team, but a special team of select trained killers to accomplish a mass murder so that it could be covered up to look like a Jonestown mass suicide. This Delta Force team was composed of 15 men. They flew into the Texas on C-130 belonging to the Triangle. One of the 15 men were 2 4-man teams. The one actually made up the insertion into the compound, a backup team, which apparently was never used. They wore black and looked like other FBI officers on the ground. The Nation watched CNN this morning. I remember watching it well. The tear gas had been designed to use crowd control, guaranteed to cause people to flee. Now it was being used inside a closed indoor living quarters where 95 men, women, and children were trapped inside. The logical question arises, why? Why did not any of these 95 women, children instantly flee for fresh air out the doors? The answers given by FBI spokesman, repeated by the news, was that Koresh and his church members had outfitted themselves with gas masks. Wilcher told Reno that the reason the Davidians inside the compound didn't flee was because the tear gas contained a neurotoxin, nerve gas, a poisonous substance, which instantly paralyzed and rendered totally helpless, defenseless all 95 men, women, and children. For all the others, they could no longer coordinate their muscles in effort required to get up. Wilcher inserted a note after this. This is an extremely serious matter. All right, according to Wilcher, let's see, before they entered the compound, this four men had received shots of atropine, the antidote to the nerve gas, so that they would not become overwhelmed and paralyzed. The first thing they did was inside the building was to subdue and kill Koresh by putting a bullet in the middle of his forehead. Relevant to this claim, the Washington Post article quotes forensic pathologists who completed an independent autopsy of the bodies of Koresh of one of his lieutenants, Steve Snyder. White said the gunshot wound in the middle of the forehead was killed Koresh, and the gunshot wound in the back of the head of Snyder were not typical of suicide. Notes of professional profile Koresh showed him not to be suicidal. Wilcher points out they had access to all the relevant information dating back to including his programming being one Manchurian candidate assassins. They must have known early on that the normal self-destruct program response implanted in the subconscious of most sleepers would not work on Koresh. Consider also the point made by a teenage girl on NBC Nightly News, who had been a member of the Davidian cult shortly before April disaster. She stated in this interview that all the children in the compound were repeatedly grilled by Koresh on precisely how to commit suicide, either by taking cyanide, poison, or gunshot. But she said Koresh insisted that you must put the gun you know where. If you put it to your temple, there's always the danger that you might survive. The New York Times in 1993 reported 2/3 of the bodies autopsied had bullet wounds in them, which examiners said had inflicted after the date of the ATF raid on February 28. The same article stated that 17 of the children were killed by means of poisonous you know what. Although I have no specific information on this point, all my other information, including the fact everyone else in the building except 9 who had been targeted to be saved were paralyzed by nerve gas and been rendered incapable of moving at all. Strongly suggests these children were likewise taken out. He went on to say the fires were fueled by white phosphorus, one of the most fearsome incendiary devices of majesty, a favorite of wet teams. It ignites instantly, burning immediately. Wet teams have also been known to corner their intended targets into a closed quarter and then throw white phosphorus in their midst, so the victims were instantly immolated right before the team's eyes. The fire, which Willie Peter produces, is so intense and the combustion so complete, the victims can only be identified by their dental records. While the wet team did kill many of those in the compound setting the fires, they apparently did not murder all the 86 men, women, and children, meaning that many of those who died were left paralyzed by nerve gas, unable to get up, free themselves from this disaster. And those consigned to this horrible fire fate being burned alive apparently included men, women, and children. Wilcher inserts another note for emphasis, totaling up the number of women and children, 86 murdered in the compound. He naively tries to let Reno and Clinton off the hook, saying their high-ranking officials in government, including Reagan and Bush holdovers in the Justice Department, and the CIA knew in advance this Waco operation was designed from the start to be a mass murder. Pointing out the importance of mind-controlled cryptocurrency, Wilcher wrote, one of the uses the agents make of their mind-controlled sophistication and plant important memory blocks into the subconscious memories of his top professional assassins in order to allow them to live what they've done. Note well, I've been informed that those memory blocks are not holding well in this incident, and that some or all 4 members of this wet team are sickened by what they were ordered to do. It appeared that some of contacts Wilcher had were among these Delta Force assassins and 12 others who were ready to come testify about what happened. Wilcher spoke of a shadow government which they used to achieve its ends. He said it was responsible for JFK, Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, Malcolm X, Edgar Hoover, his close associate Tulsa, in the midst of the Watergate scandal, Martha Mitchell, Senior John Towers, Senior John Hines, Congressman Ted Weiss, and John Lennon. He also said that the attempted life of Reagan was engineered by the shadow government. of which identity leader would be revealed to Reno by the 16 covert operatives who wished to come forward. Wilcher went on to say that the October surprise caper was treason by which George Bush and Reagan and a select group of operatives rigged and thus stole in 1980 election in the November 1980. He claimed that 50 or so witnesses were murdered over the years, witnesses who could have testified as to the truth of what happened in the October surprise and Iran-Contra scandals. He called this the mother of all corruptions, for the tentacles of this conspiracy extend all across our nation and reach into all levels and function. They operate those functions of government which controls the same manner that organized crime used to run its myriad criminal racketeering enterprises. Indeed, that's the whole point here. They conduct business of government not in an open, honest, legitimate, forthright manner according to laws, constitution, democratic principles of the United States, but a secret, clandestine, utterly illegal manner. He pointed to the wholesale theft of billions and billions of dollars from saving and loans associations and banks of this countries, saying that the proceeds of this massive thievery was used to fund Black One operations, illegal gun running, illegal drug smuggling, illegal money laundering, all on a massive scale. Other than the testimony of Wilcher's client, Gunther, there's evidence Koresh was the subject of hypnotic programming and used it himself on members of his church. Among other telltale signs of mind control, Koresh's songs and sermons contain obvious phonetic embeds, like those in hypno programming. Phonetic embeds are linguistic phenomenon where words are embedded inside other words such a way no one can deny they're there. Few laymen, however, would admit these mere words can influence behavior. Professionals, however, know that if a subliminal makes any sense, they can reinforce the surface meanings and produce powerful behavior effects. Much of the research done on the embeds has been done by scholars studying James Finnegan's Wake. Koresh's letter in January 1987, while hardly equal to Joyce's masterwork, in which nearly every word was a phonetic embed, was full of linguistic embeds. I've seen 7 eyes and 7 horns. My name is Word of God, and I ride on a white horse. I'm here to give you the 7th angel's message. I was ascended from the east with the seal of the living God. My name is Cyrus. I'm here to destroy Babylon. I have come in a way that's contrary to preconceived ideas. I will reprove you for your world loving. I will scold your daughters for their nakedness and pride they parade in my Father's house, and by my angels I will strip them naked before all eyes before their foolish pride. The young men will abuse my kindness. They will take my life, but I will arise and take theirs forevermore. Your ministers would lament your foolishness. Your lost flock will tear you to pieces. Prepare to meet thy God. And that was David Koresh's phonetic embed deciphered. Wilcher tried to meet Janet Reno. Now Wilcher's body was found on the toilet. Let's see. After the letter, Wilcher's body was found on the toilet. He bled extensively from the colon. The autopsy was performed, declared no cause of death. The morgue called let's see. It says obviously frustrated, and lives of other witnesses, myself, in grave danger. And then he was ended up found on the toilet, bled extensively from the colon. While Walter Reed, it says he was the official sent tissue samples to Wilcher's organs to the armed forces of pathology at Walter Reed. Why Walter Reed? Because it's located in direct energy biomedical research. The body was quickly cremated. Talking on the cyber SAM was that Wilcher had been targeted by a highly amplified infrasound beam. One report from the scene described Wilcher's blood as being expelled from the colon while the body was being removed. This description is consistent with internal organ rupture. So they're saying that Wilcher was killed with direct energy. Host of a mind control forum on Genie, Rita Hill informed the world about her friend Paul Wilcher, quoted with permission. Attorney Paul Wilcher died where he lived, Washington, D.C. His apartment was in a brick building in Northeast Washington, an agreeable neighborhood in the city known for disagreements. An early afternoon of June 23rd, 1993, a two-person NBC video crew arrived at 637 3rd Street Northeast address. White House correspondent Sarah McClendon was on the scene soon after. The body had been removed 2 hours. However, no members of the news media would be allowed to enter Wilcher home on this Wednesday. The police had contacted FBI about noon. Special agent in charge, Dane DeSarno, and several other FBI agents and CIA agent would survey the location before dusk. By the next day, the forensic evidence in the department, his notes, papers, and the files, his computer had been cleaned out. Although more than 9 agents investigated, they claimed they were not interested in pursuing the matter. News media coverage was non-existent, while the internet ran rife with speculation. One of Wilcher's clients was none other than Gunther Russbacher, a key figure in the Inslaw scandal. Hill continued. Gunther Russbacher did a deep black covert operative, and in 1993 was a prisoner in Missouri. Over the previous years, Wilcher had become Russbacher's lawyer and was increasingly confided in by the spy master. In the immoral chess game of international espionage, Russbacher had become a grand champion. He's been viewed by various people as a scoundrel, a martyr, a patriot, a traitor, an assassin, a hero, or all of the aforementioned. In his letter to Attorney General, Wilcher written, "My client here is Gunther Russbacher, a lifelong operative for CIA and Office of Naval Intelligence, who's operated at the highest levels of both these super secret organizations over the past 30 and 25 years, respectively. Because of extremely high intelligence, his physical skills, his extensive training, his fluency in language, his proficiency as one of the top pilots and marksmen, and the fact that his father was one of the original founders, along with William Casey, Wild Bill Donovan of CIA back in 1947, Gunther has always operated at the highest levels of these intelligence organizations and been trusted in carrying out some of their most difficult, sensitive, and top secret operations. The best yardstick for a character complex as Russbacher, he'll continue, may be the measure of his families, two who are well known, Michelle Gorchop and Robert Inman. The less famous include his wife, Raylan expose Rodney Stitch, and Paul Wilcher, all people from different backgrounds with strong principles and a willingness to make great sacrifices for these principles. Because the Iran-Contra scandal, Admiral Inman resigned from CIA in '86. This is unprecedented oxygen for any high officer, let alone director of Office of Navy Intelligence. It was unprecedented as Gorbachev's initiatives. But by the late 1980s, America's intelligence community had been divided with scandals as well as the Cold War. The widow of Navy physicist John Dyer had written, he married, and as CIA operative in a new scenario, Russbacher found himself in no man's land. In '89, he married Ray Allen, the widow of Navy physicist John Dyer. She had written newsletter articles critical of CIA. Gunther was arrested shortly after their marriage and was incarcerated in one of the many of the harshest prisons he would occupy for the next 4 years. On the evening of 1991, April 30th, Russbacher missed a helicopter flight from Alameda, California to Fort Odd, California. He said someone drugged his coffee, causing him to miss the flight. After the helicopter exploded, he started telling the story. Journalists and concerned citizens listened for hours on end as the darkest secrets were revealed in great detail. There truly had been an October surprise deal in 1980 to keep 52 American hostages in Tehran until Reagan became president. The CIA indeed participated in the looting of S&Ls, and yes, the agency did use direct energy mind control on people it wanted to control, and on and on and on. For speaking up, he was tortured in prison. Talk radio person David Emery relayed in one incident, his cellmate began not only throwing up blood, but defecating in blood in extremes, spewing out of both ends of his anatomy. If that incident had been a warning, it seemed to break Gunther's resolve. Later in Missouri, he endured 3 separate heart attacks, but kept on talking. Direct energy weapons can cause both heart attacks and organ ruptures, Hill explained. In the February-January issue of the Bioelectric Magnetic Society stated that Walter Reed's Department of Microwave Research had acquired the hardware needed to test the biological effects of high-powered pulsed microwaves by 1987. It revealed that such microwave energy penetrates all organ systems of the body and puts every organ at risk. The team has obtained evidence that non-thermal effect postulated several years ago does in fact occur and must be considered as potentially serious. Whether or not Koresh were planning to execute a quasi-military operation, as national security spokesman would have us believe, the real tragedy of Waco is how these people were set up. Since at least the 50s, Project Artichoke, they had available mind control techniques as a way to create agent provocateurs. These people would be hypnotized to perform agency dirty work upon receiving pre-programmed signal. The community refers such subjects as sleepers. In the last 2 decades, they have increasingly used microwaves, transmitting cues directly in the subconscious minds of their sleepers. The FBI admitted discussing the use of such technology on Koresh. This was published in July 1993 article in Defense Electronics by Mark Tapscott. Paul Wilcher heard that Koresh and 6 other derivatives were sleepers on March 11, 1993. His letters show a high degree of confidence in information he received about Waco. At least one of Wilcher's contacts said that all 4 members of the Delta Force team had been assassinated, along with many family members. 1 year after the Waco fire, America's mainstream news medias are no closer to exposing what government agencies or Davidians were up to than on the day that Mount Carmel Sentinel burned to the ground. If ignorance in the middle ground between lies and truth, perhaps it's an accomplishment. A listener to one of my radio interviews sent me a page from Subterranean Worlds by Walter Kraftner Minkle. It tells of Cyrus Teed, who was born in 1839 in New York. He had a vision and believed himself to be the second coming of Christ. He found his name in Cyrus in Hebrew was Koresh. He founded a cult and moved to a colony that formed several hundred people to Fort Myers, Florida. This Koreshian cult bought 6,000 acres of land and were beginning to pose a political threat to established politicians in the county when a hurricane blew the colony away. Ms. Hims wrote, I believe Koresh was a mind control experiment, and Koresh's maniacal programmer used previous little-known religious sect as a model for a fun scenario. I believe the experiment possibly got out of control and had to be terminated. No body could be found for autopsy as it would reveal an implant. Another interesting coincidence Him wrote is that David Koresh named his son Cyrus. On November 16th and 17th, 1993, a non-lethal weapons conference was held at Johns Hopkins University. Here, for the first time, proponents of direct energy and other exotic weapons were compelled to present their cases publicly. Many of the participating laboratories were closed in the succeeding year, but many projects were scheduled at other labs. And for that, I'm done with my video. Sorry it was so long. I just really wanted to dive into that. But I had another thing, and I think this is still a good example of what happened. But to go in his story, I was reading another story of how they programmed him, that when he was in that truck that night, that railroad, and he had that vision come to him. I think that was all pre-programmed and pumped in his head via V2K. I think he really thought he heard that from God, because that's why they call V2K the voice of God weapon. And if you want to look at the book and see, this is Gang Stalking, Mind Control, and Cults. It's a website by webmaster Dr. Eric Karlstrom. Waco Fire Revisited, CIA Mind Control Cult Damage Control from W. Bowert, 1994 was the book, when the book was written. So anyway, I hope y'all enjoyed this. Just goes to show how programming works. If you think you RTI, MK Ultra victim, satanic ritual abuse survivor, please email me at hollyspunk@gmail.com. Thanks for your time and your support, and God bless all TIs.